Hello and welcome to Waterloo Transmissions YouTube channel, and we're here in the studio with Jim Millard, co-owner of Waterloo Transmissions. Thanks for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me, Dan. Really appreciate the opportunity to tell our story about who we are and what we are, and what makes us different, makes us better.
And that is the slogan. And tell us what makes Waterloo Transmissions different.
Well, let me wind that back a bit.
Sure.
Let me start at the beginning. My father started the business in 1967. And my brother and I took over operations in 1976. He died in the very early 80s. Mm-hmm. And so my brother and I have been banging heads together for 40 plus years. And when we first started with our business, we were more like gas station, general repair, that type of thing.
Sure.
And evolved and kind of morphed more into the transmission side of business. Well, and as we moved along through the 80s and the early 90s, we opened our second location. And as we moved through that process, some growing pains, some learning processes going on, 4 years later, we opened our third location. Well, at that point in time, it became apparent if we were going to deliver a quality product to all of our customers uniformly, we needed to make some changes. What we experienced was this, Dan. We might be able to rebuild a good transmission, say a Ford transmission in store A, but store B did a really great job on Chevrolet. And store C was just banging out good Chrysler work. Well, you know, that wasn't necessarily fair to our customers.
There's an inconsistency
There was an inconsistency issue. Sure. And so we recognized that in order to be fair to our customers, give a uniform product, uniform service, we opened up a remanufacturing center that could serve all of our stores. So we collectively pulled all of our tooling and training and technology and put it into one facility so that we could control that process. So that was probably the number one thing that really made us stick out, I believe, you know, against or among our competitors.
Sure, how many other competitors have their own manufacturing center?
Absolutely, and so that really made a difference in who we were on how we wanted to serve our customers. The other feature of that was this has been a difficult business to work with. You bring your vehicle to us. This is the traditional way that it works. You bring your vehicle to us. We look at it. We go, well, you know, we think it's going to cost about, you know, this much to fix it, but we have to take the transmission out of the car, dismantle it, and then we can tell you the rest of the story. Kind of an uncomfortable way to do business. Well, with the remanufacturing center and having our reman ready units to go, you know, ready to go units is what I meant to say, is you were able to bring your vehicle in. I can say, hey, it's going to cost this much for the transmission and this much for the labor and this much for the fluid and this much for the tax. That made life go a lot easier for us and the customer. So that was a great difference that we could bring to the.
In a big way, you take away the fear of a huge repair bill that's unexpected.
Absolutely.
Because the customer brings the car in, and the price that you quote, you can be firm in knowing, no matter what the circumstance, here's a worst case scenario, and they can leave with that number, and that takes a great deal of uncertainty out of the equation.
Absolutely. And as far as just the relationship with the customer being satisfied, you know, everyone wants their customer to recommend their company to their friends and family members.
Sure.
And about the only way you can do that in a real solid way is be sure you're making your deals going in and not on the backside. So that was one key ingredient, I think, that we really incorporated that made us different, made us better.
Educate folks watching right now, maybe who have a transmission issue, that are watching this right now online. How would you decide whether or not you're going to repair your existing transmission or go with one of your remanufactured transmissions?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that. When a vehicle comes in, we have a very standardized process that all of our technicians are thoroughly trained on to evaluate what is happening with the transmission. Is it an electronic problem? Is it a mechanical problem? And let me tell you, a large percent of the problems that we deal with today are electronic, sensors, solenoid switches, computers, wiring.
Sure.
And so we want to be sure that if we're going to do something mechanical, that we've extinguished all the other possible minor possibilities first. And let me say this, probably, in fact, statistically, just a little over 60% of the vehicles that come through the door actually don't need a transmission. Huh. It's some other minor mechanical issue.
Sure.
Or electronic issue usually.
Sure.
So if we've established that it's not something simple, it's not a simple solution, we don't have a simple fix here, and the transmission's got to come out of the chassis to be replaced or rebuilt, we first, calculate the cost of replacement. And so then I'm going to tell, if you're my customer, Dan, here's what it costs to replace the transmission. It's the worst case scenario. Now, if you would like to rebuild the transmission, we'll take it out, dismantle it, calculate the cost of the materials and the labor involved. And hey, if we can save you money doing that, we'll save you money. But like in so many cases today, you dismantle something, and today more than ever before, you dismantle something, and if you want to do it correctly and follow the factory recommended, what the engineers at the factory recommend to do, the upgrades, the changes, the enhancements to enhance durability, drivability, if you want to incorporate that in the rebuild process, it can get quite expensive. So consequently, the customer, if we find out your transmission is going to cost $10,000 to fix, and you can buy a new one for $2,000, well, it's a no-brainer,
Sure.
or a remand. So that's kind of the way we approach the.
How do you ease a customer's mind when they're perhaps calling to see if they could bring you the car, the diagnostic process? How do you say, okay, bring it to us, and what is the diagnostic process all about? And when you're talking to a customer on the phone that's thinking of choosing Waterloo Transmissions, what do you tell them, and how does that process start? How do they initiate the process?
You know, that's a really good question, because every customer call, if you got a problem with your transmission, your heart starts going boom, 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 there goes my summer vacation.
Sure.
You know, it's going to really affect your budget. And so consequently, every customer that calls says, yeah, how much for a transmission rebuild or whatever for this vehicle? And you know, you've got to answer that question. They ask a question, and I can answer the question. If you need a new transmission or a remanufactured transmission, this is how much it costs. And now we have to get into, but why are you wanting to replace the transmission? Well, every customer is going to say the same thing. I don't want to, it just seems like I have to.
Right.
Well, then you have to educate the customer. That's not necessarily true. We go over in detail, step by step, what it is that our diagnostic routine entails. And the fact that, as I said before, over 60% of the customers coming in actually don't need a transmission.
They're not going to be spending
and so
$1,500
once you
or $2,000.
educate your
Sure.
once you educate your customer and they understand a little bit more how the system works, then they're going to choose 9 times out of 10 to bring it to us and let us go through our diagnostic protocol. And then ultimately, if we can find a simple solution, that's less advertising I have to buy.
There you go.
Because they're going to be preaching the gospel of Waterloo Transmissions till the day they die.
Word of mouth is good for your business.
Absolutely, can't
No
buy
doubt.
that type.
No doubt. Thank you for taking a minute to educate customers. You're watching the Waterloo Transmissions YouTube channel series.